Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Doyle, this is the Verdigris Table, and in this video I am going to teach you an incredible trick that I kind of learned by accident and has since become my Dungeon Master superpower. Knowing this will help you have way less canceled Dungeons & Dragons sessions, and even if that's never been an issue for you, in which case congrats, this also unlocks a whole mode of play I have come to really enjoy and frankly prefer to your typical game sometimes. I'm not going to hold out on you. Here's the secret. Say you have 5 players and for whatever reason or reasons, right, 3 of them can't make it to game night. Play anyway. Run only 2 players, Ryan? Yep, run for 2 players. But the book says you should have 4 to 5 players, and I checked the internet and people say at least 3, but more is better, and it's okay. Trust me, I've done it a bunch and it's fine. Better than fine, actually. We're going to cover the why you'd want to do this first, then we'll talk a bit about the how, and then I'm going to dig into the fact that it's awesome. And if you try this, it might be your new favorite way to play D&D. So here's the first thing to realize here. If you cancel game night, every time people can't make it, it is very easy to break the momentum and undermine your whole campaign. And that might sound like an exaggeration, but it's sneaky like that. It's insidious, and it happens all the time. Cancel one session because someone's not feeling well. The next week, someone's got a work thing. And then the week after that, somebody else doesn't have a babysitter. And suddenly, your weekly game hasn't happened for a month, and all of that excitement cools off as everyone becomes less invested in the story and the characters, and ultimately the feeling of looking forward to game night gets replaced by doubting that a session will even happen this week. Look, if I'm a player in a game that you are running and I am reliably available and I'm making game night work with my schedule and responsibilities, but other people are flaking and half the time we don't play, I'm probably going to stop prioritizing your game. Eventually, I might go find another group. Especially in the early stages, a new game is a very fragile thing, but this sort of thing can end well-established campaigns as well, especially if we're talking about last-minute cancellations. As long as 2 players show up, I'm running some D&D. Hell, if I was down to 1 player, just me as the DM and 1 other person, I'd figure something out. I've done it before. It rewards the players who have followed through on their commitments, and it keeps them coming back. It also maybe gives the other players the dreaded FOMO, fear of missing out. For a certain kind of player, it's one thing if they can pause the game whenever something else comes along, right? But it's another thing entirely if the game goes on without them and they're missing out on the good times and the treasure, the XP maybe even, but most of all, it keeps the momentum going. If your game night is happening practically no matter what, it exerts a certain gravity that is going to attract players that show up practically no matter what. It's funny, but if you're willing to run for fewer players, you are more likely to keep your table full. In the rare case where I can't make a session as a DM, and since COVID, I do think a lot of us are smarter about, staying home when we're sick instead of powering through and, spreading diseases. So yeah, if I can't make a game night, I encourage somebody else to run a one-shot or just have everybody play board games or something. Plus, look, I almost feel dumb saying this, but the point is to spend time together having fun. So more time spent playing is innately a good thing, right? Okay, so I find people get the why pretty easily, but it's the how that trips them up. I have this adventure built for 4 or 5 PCs. How do I rebalance it for half of a group? Honestly, this is the sort of thing that can feel scary before you've done it, but it is actually pretty easy once you have a little bit of experience. I just naturally do it on the fly now, making adjustments as I go, but if you need some basic ground rules, a good place to start is cut the number of enemies in half, and, reduce the damage from traps and other effects. Also, always a good idea, hand out a few extra healing potions as well. In 5e, I let characters drink them as a bonus action, though it's a full action to, administer one to someone else. And I know Bob Worldbuilder made a great video on this not very long ago, but in my headcanon, a regular potion of healing is like one of those little test tube shots that at least they used to hand out in places I was usually trying to leave early, right? Some overpriced, brightly colored liquid that just goes down quickly and easily. Experience will teach you what the players can handle, and the lessons you learn for like a quote-unquote full party all apply to running for 2 players as well. You want to pay closer attention to like where they are at with resources and hit points, but the good news is it's way easier to keep track of that with fewer PCs. Sidekicks from Tasha's are also a solid option here and are a good way to inject like whatever skill set a small party might feel like it's lacking. Now, I will say, sometimes having to make up for missing abilities can lead to some real fun and creative solutions, but sometimes you just need like a weird little dude who's good at picking locks. I have started treating sidekicks like hirelings recently. Sure, you can get help, but it's going to cost you, right? The farmer is going to hold a torch for 5 silver a day, maybe, but if you want someone who will be a bit more of an asset down in the dungeon, we're talking more like 5 to 10 gold. Or you could just have someone join up from the goodness of their hearts, of course, or maybe it's like an unpaid internship and they're just here for the experience. A sidekick gives you an NPC on hand at all times to drop hints and quips, which can be nice, but don't let them outshine the characters or solve everything for the party. I like to have the players controlling the sidekicks more than anything, and the right kind of player is going to enjoy having multiple characters. It's also like good dungeon master training. You can also have the players just roll up full-fledged characters, right? But depending on class and level and player experience, of course, that can be more of like a heavy lift. Still, in the good old days when characters were way simpler, people would have stables of PCs, and I don't see why most of them would have to wait in town while only a pair go on the adventure. But most of the time, I've run for 2 or 3 players, we don't use sidekicks, and for a lot of modules, you might be surprised how little adjusting it actually takes. If things go bad for the party, I'll pull some punches occasionally, sure, but look, I haven't used a Dungeon Master screen in years. I roll in the open, on the table. There's no fudging going on. Does that mean occasionally a couple low-level characters get trounced by a couple kobolds or something? Yep, it just happened to us on Thursday, and I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, but that's a feature, not a bug, gang. Now, these were beefy, Pathfinder 2e Kobold Scouts, and a player rolled 4 natural ones in a row. No lie, it was incredible. Sorry, Bill. And we realized these characters are going down. TPKs are easy when one character dropping a 0 means half the party's out. So what did I do? What happened, right? The kobolds stop when one player goes down, and they say, leave all your treasure and we'll let you live to the survivor. So he hands over all the gear from the downed PC and actually passes a risky deception check to get past them with his own and carries his buddy out of there. Losing a fight doesn't automatically mean the story is over for these characters. Surrender, robbery, capture, being held for ransom, forced into like fighting pits, intelligent enemies aren't always going to fight to the death in both senses of that term. It can tee up a revenge plot or a daring escape, even a rescue mission. I'd love the comments in this video to get filled up with other alternatives a DM can use when a TPK is evident. The heroes losing once in a while is great for the story, and it lights a fire under the players. So what did mine do? They retreated, healed up, distributed the remaining gear, and they went right back down for revenge. And somehow they got their butts handed to them again. Now they're both dropped, and that's the end of negotiations as far as the kobolds are concerned, right? So they both make their death saves and wake up in the darkness of the dungeon some unknown number of hours later, and they crawled back to safety. They are currently working in town to save up enough money to re-equip themselves and once again go down there and seek revenge. Now, this is all a topic worthy of its own video, but you gotta be willing to kill characters, no matter how many are in the party. You don't have to go crazy hard, run meat grinders, but if the threat of death gets taken out of the game completely, then you lose just all the stakes and tension. I mean, if your table has decided you don't want the possibility of failure and loss in your game, okay, you do you, but the game is way less fun for me that way, and the story is way less meaningful. I'll lean on the scales a little bit if it's like the fickleness of the dice doing it or I screwed up, but if it's the player's choices doing it.
If he dies, he dies.
What happens when a character dies in D&D? Well, you get to experience one of the things that makes this thing we're doing so special. That's what. You mourn a little bit, maybe share some stories as if it were a wake, have some laughs, shed some tears, and then you roll up a new one. Another potential issue when you sit down to play with some or most of the party MIA is what are you going to do about those missing characters? Now, personally, this is one thing I am definitely willing to just hand wave. I typically work hard to make my game world coherent and like consistent for sure. I like verisimilitude. I want things to make sense. But at the same time, there's always a degree of like shared buy-in, suspension of disbelief, some degree of abstraction going on. And the intrusion of like real world scheduling is exactly the place I am most willing to like cash in on that. Dungeon Masters put in a lot of effort, and I'm not sure we should be expected to put in even more because somebody else didn't show up. If there's an obvious, elegant solution available, I'll narrate it out to open a session, sure, but if we're deep in a dungeon and people are popping in and out of existence, a goofy joke is as good as an elaborate explanation as far as I'm concerned. And players are usually great at coming up with those jokes. If the player wants to explain what their character was up to when they show up again next time, that's cool. I will say I'm not a huge fan of letting people run other people's characters, which is another alternative here. If the player's into it, then okay, I guess. But I can adjust things on my side. You don't need the PC in there for balance. And now what the hell happens if they die? It's a tricky situation that requires trust, and that's one call I don't think the Dungeon Master should be making on their own. You know what? As a counterpoint to the ways to redirect a TPK, let's also share ways we've explained away, characters popping in and out of existence mid-adventure in the comments, because I bet we get some good ones. Okay, I try hard to draw from my experience without claiming my way is the right way or the only way to play D&D, so if you are really worried about continuity, or maybe you ended up on a cliffhanger for like that climactic boss fight or something, here's some options on how to handle missing players as well. Do a one-shot with new characters. Maybe some low-level newbies had to go clear out that dungeon you prepped months ago, but the players, zigged when you thought they'd zag. Or maybe you do a prequel, have a little like flashback one-shot where you add to those characters' backstories. Messing with the timeline, kind of feels dangerous sometimes. What if somebody dies then, right? Well, you can be careful. Or you can have it be a downtime session. Have the characters back in town, making connections and preparations, using all of those like social skills they forgot they had. Or maybe they're exploring libraries and visiting sages and learning some lore, baby. Maybe they also get like a new outfit and some sweet magic items too, just to make sure the people who canceled last minute have a reason to be jelly next week. Okay, I hope this far into the video I've convinced you that there are good reasons to have this move in your Dungeon Master arsenal and giving you enough info to feel confident that you can pull it off. And that's great because it could literally be the difference between meeting consistently for a resilient campaign and game night kind of just fizzling out. But here's the other thing, and I saved it for the end because this is the real good stuff I want to share with those of you who have actually stuck with me through this. Running for just 2 players is incredible. It's true. It's kind of the best. Does it come with challenges? Sure. We just talked about most of them throughout most of this video, but man, most of the time, like when half the group cancels, I actually get excited now. My players do too, because D&D with smaller groups is way more intense. There's zero waiting. It's all spotlight all the time. Decisions between 2 players get made quickly because there are fewer voices to be heard and everybody has to step up. There's nowhere to hide. You progress through content. Every choice is meaningful. Every action is cinematic. It is peak D&D. Now, are there better dungeon masters than I am out there bringing that like same attention and keeping the pacing up when there's 5 or 6 players and a commensurately larger number of monsters to take care of? Maybe, but I definitely see a difference on my end. And I've seen a lot of like top tier actual plays and witnessed a lot of like side conversations and crosstalk while players are waiting for their turn. That's not happening with 3 or 4 people at the table. Now, are some players more comfortable as supporting cast or practically audience members and rather not step up to fill a lead role? Sure. But you might be surprised who opens up in a smaller group. And it doesn't have to be like the every session kind of thing. I'm not saying you should build yourself a 2-player campaign, though I've been playing Pathfinder with 2 players every Thursday for a month now, and it's been amazing. So you certainly could. I'm just saying keep on rocking with like your 4 to 5, and when a couple people cancel, treat it like an opportunity and not a problem, because I really think you're going to love it if you try running D&D for 2 people. If you want to go the other way and blow your game wide open, incorporate a dozen, 50, who knows, 100 players, check out this video, or consider this one where a simple optional rule can easily unlock all these different modes of play and just much more. Thank you so much for watching. Be kind, have fun, and I will see you next time.